What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution, episode 14.
Yes, 14.
Yeah, I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian.
And this is our last episode before the new year of being from the current time.
Yeah, we're heading to New Zealand in 2 days, where I'm from.
Yeah.
My proud homeland. And yeah, we've pre-recorded some episodes.
Yeah, two episodes.
You will be well taken care of. You will not miss your dose of Twink Revolution while we're gallivanting around the South Pacific.
Yeah, you will not become Twink deficient while we're gone. We will not allow it.
Vitamin Twink.
Yeah.
It's important. So anyway, that'll be out. We have a very special Christmas or holiday themed episode, a happy holidays episode.
Yeah, and a good episode before the New Year's, get your shit together.
Yeah, exactly. So, look forward to those.
Yeah.
What else is going on?
Well, today is Chelsea Manning's birthday.
Happy birthday, Chelsea.
Yes, sadly she is still in prison for the second time because of liberals.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
it was Obama. I guess that's Trump too. So both parties, bipartisanship that we've always wanted.
Yeah, it's important to reach across the aisle and jail political dissidents and whistleblowers. That's like just an important value. Aaron Sorkin said as much.
Yes. Just wanted to put it out there so everyone is remembered that she's still out there. She fought for your freedoms, and yeah.
Yeah, that
but
really sucks.
She's not the only one who got fucked over by the system, though, from the left. Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh, yes. Young Mr. Corbyn.
Daddy.
That was a blow. That sucked.
Yeah. I was kind of heartbroken, and I'm not even from Britain, so...
No, I mean, it was very easy to get swept up, I think, in the...
Twitterverse.
Well, the Twitterverse, but also just mean like the hope for what is possible. The polling was pretty clear for quite a while that this was probably not going to work.
Yeah.
So it's not like one had to delude oneself. It's merely like you could be hopeful that it might. Which, is not the comparable situation to young Bernard Sanders.
No, I agree.
Because polling tells us that like he's still definitely in the game and actually beating pretty much everyone else.
Yeah.
There was a poll came out today with a statistical tie with Joseph Meltbrain Biden.
I'm just really sad that Boris Johnson won because he's such a fuckface. I hate him.
He's particularly terrible. But
and he's not even hot. Like Jeremy Corbyn,
daddy.
He's a daddy.
Yeah.
But also good politics.
Yeah. I mean, well, you have to think about all the many column inches that have been devoted since the electoral loss on, when was it? So 5 days ago, right?
Yeah, it was last
Thursday or something Friday,
like that.
Our time. Many wise commentators have weighed in with their analysis, and we're no different. We're wading in right now. We're doing it.
Yeah, it looks like according to BBC, the breakdown was Tories, which is the Conservative Party, got 364 MPs, and Labour only got 203. And then the third largest was the Scottish Nationalist Party.
Scottish National Party, I think, is it?
National, whatever, I don't give a fuck. But there was some parties that got votes surprisingly. The Greens got one, the Brexit Party got none because they basically withdrew all of theirs. So Boris Johnson can get all of them.
Yeah, it's so the cheap version of this analysis goes something like the electorate has repudiated the sort of socialist populist policies of Jeremy Corbyn and have run into the arms of Boris Johnson.
Yeah,
I don't personally believe this is the case.
I don't agree either. I think it actually gives some great lessons to the left of what not to do, because I think if we go for the episode, we'll kind of touch on some of these topics that kind of impacted the Labour campaign and what probably alienated a lot of the population. I mean, for one, the Brexit change in 2019.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think
it was a Brexit vote.
Yeah, I think it is. It's it is not overly reductive to say that Brexit was the deciding issue in all of this. The when you start equivocating on these issues, you're in very dangerous water, and we've actually seen this for Elizabeth Warren, right, where her triangulation on Medicare for all, and now retreating to a position which is essentially identical to Mayor Peters, like Medicare for all who want it, basically is it's tanked her in the polls, and you know I'm a big fan of the idea that sort of political choice is largely phony. But people can still smell a phony from a long way away. Yeah. And the problem is once you start equivocating, you lose trust, right? You're like, well, you're willing to sort of say anything. And I genuinely believe that, you know, there were multiple factors for Labour in the UK, one of which was their unwillingness to take a position on Brexit that anybody could actually parse. It was initially a sort of like kind of crypto remain, then it was a second referendum, then it was sort of like second referendum, but actually if you want to stay, you have to do it with us. And it was completely incoherent, and they never quite landed on a position that people could trust.
Yeah.
The other one was, of course, that the center of the Labour Party were more interested in defeating Corbyn than they were in defeating the Conservatives. I mean, they hated that man with a passion.
Totally.
And there's a lesson there for us as well.
Same to Liberal Democrats. I mean, apparently the number of seats taken hasn't been matched since Margaret Thatcher, that glorious bitch's former PM.
Occupant of the current national dance floor.
I don't mean bitch and like, yes, queen, slay bitch, but like burn in hell bitch.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really bad defeat. And if you think about sort of the history of this issue, right, you have a sort of a referendum that sort of made it through just, I can't remember the exact margins, maybe 49-51 or something of that order.
Yeah.
Then Theresa May's election not going super well, but they pulled it out with the support of the DUP and things like that. And now, unfortunately, this one, right, it's very hard to, you can't square the circle here. You have to confront the idea that there were people who were sufficiently animated by Brexit or by the perception that their Brexit vote was being ignored.
Yeah.
They were unwilling to trust the many factions within Labour who were either sort of ultra-Remainers and saying, we will, we just want to completely ignore this result and just proceed as though it never happened, or did not trust the electoral promises of saying, hey, we'll do another vote, or whatever. It's like, no, well, we don't believe you.
Also, the complete, consistent smear of everyone who supported Brexit as being like a right-wing.
Oh, you mean all the racists? The racist deplorables, yeah.
But there was actual leftists who are anti-EU. I mean, this idea that a lot of these leftists, in quotations, were defensive or like supporting the EU just outright and not questioning it. It's like, this is a neoliberal institution that often pushes austerity measures in countries. Like Ukraine's a good example. Like they try to push that into their policies.
The EU is not a socialist organization.
Like completely ignoring that, and they're still doing the same thing of like, oh, these people fucked up. They just voted for a racist and all that. But this whole vote was just a larger Brexit vote with like figureheads. Turns out sometimes people are single issue voters.
Totally. I mean, you can be a single issue voter and not be a horrible racist. You can also, in some sense, right, like have just not seen an alternative for you. Let's say you had some nuanced view on Brexit, or what you were being offered by Labour was this sort of like eventually this Lexit kind of idea of like, oh, we're going to negotiate a better deal. And if you were like, well, that's completely unpersuasive to me, then who do you vote for? You just don't vote. And yet again, turnout was very low.
I think it's part of the reason why the Scottish National Party had so many wins, just because this kind of back and forth isn't really like a guarantee for the Scottish people who, after the Brexit vote, voted on independence. And I feel like after this vote, if they do leave the EU, they're probably going to actually achieve their win to separate from the UK, which will be really fucking interesting because a lot of them probably would have voted for Labour if they would have sided.
Yeah, I mean, so Nicola Sturgeon is the SNP leader in Scotland, is basically saying it's time for a second independence referendum for Scotland, and good on them. Sort of balkanization of nations is not always a desirable outcome, but for the United Kingdom specifically, it's like at least funny. There's some hubris involved for like this was the largest empire in the world that was sort of held together at the point of a gun, and the various trading companies that were basically just privateers, and so the idea that it's like falling apart is amusing. Although clearly we our hearts go out to the British listeners for whom this is probably quite traumatic and quite unpleasant.
Yes, I mean, I guess this shows that electoralism as the sole priority can't always be relied on, and maybe the strategy needs to be readdressed versus blaming everyone else for why your party lost, which is what many of the key figureheads of kind of the radical liberal, like Labour defenders, like a lot of like Novara Media, like Owen Jones, Ashikar. Not to call names.
I think Owen Jones will come up in a little bit.
Yeah.
I genuinely think there is something to be said for the Labour MPs who basically were the last the last clingers on of the Blair era, the sort of New Labour.
Mm-hmm.
Just the absolute venom they reserved only for the sort of Corbyn wing of the party. So I'm happy to say, like, if you aren't completely disillusioned with electoralism, then get rid of those people. Like that's where you focus your like electoral efforts should be to make sure those people don't hang on to power anymore.
I think it's very heartbreaking because Corbyn, like Bernie Sanders, is kind of a dying breed of like class-focused Labour politicians. Like once
rules.
He's gone, like he's done. He's not going to run again.
Nope, he's resigned as leader of the party, and that's like the right move generally.
I don't see a Labour win in the future.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see if they manage to put themselves back together, and Johnson may just like run the country into the ground. I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche, unfortunately, for sort of leftists to say, simply say like, no, it's fine. The heightening of the contradictions will definitely get us it done this time.
It just kills a lot of people, which is really unfortunate. Like,
no, there's a real human cost to this, and it's incredibly sad to see. But I think it sort of just should galvanize us to fight harder.
Yeah.
We should make sure we give no quarter. And if you believe my analysis, right, which is to say that I think the center of the Labour Party are largely to blame for this loss.
No, I agree.
Pushing Corbyn in weird directions towards essentially extreme positions that have no broad support.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should regard these people as our political enemies. To the same degree that actually like the right wing are our political enemies. There's no there's no distinction you can draw here, which says our aims will not be achieved if either of these people hold power.
Yeah, I don't think if we don't deal with the identity politics, like wing of the left, and I mean that in a very broad sense, I don't think we're gonna win. We've already seen it destroy numerous groups in the U.S. I mean, DSA's national conference was a complete train wreck and laughingstock, and I think the same thing happened.
Point of personal privilege.
But the same thing happened in Britain, and I think the best example of that is kind of feeding into this right-wing centrist lie of anti-Semitism in the Jeremy Corbyn campaign, and kind of touching back on Owen Jones' case. He wrote 4 or more articles talking about how to deal with anti-Semitism on the left, and like, why would you feed into a lie, which is basically just BDS or Palestinian liberation is now considered anti-Semitism? It's just ridiculous.
Right. I think was it? Fuck, I don't remember who it was. Noah Belatsky or something wrote the Bernie Sanders may be ethnically Jewish, but this is a smear that is so lazy that it doesn't really bear a response.
Yeah, I mean, I showed you the person on my Instagram. They shared after Boris Johnson won, saying, "At least the Jews will feel safe tonight."
Yes.
As if they felt unsafe. Like, sure, there's anti-Semitism everywhere in the world. Just like there's homophobia, but like, I don't sleep in the U.S. knowing there's homophobia unsafe. Like, it's completely ludicrous. And often the ones who accuse the left wing of anti-Semitism are often tied with like the Israeli state, often more privileged audiences, or they're Christian like fundamentalists who just want to create an Israeli state to bring the second coming of Christ and like end of days. So it's
you would have to imagine that if your genuine concern was for the physical safety of Jewish people in a particular nation, the right wing holding a lot of power is not going to be the thing you want, particularly not these sort of elements of the right wing that are openly anti-Semitic.
yes,
And I mean in the true sort of race race-centric way of like the Jews control the banks, man, and they're like
George Soros.
yeah, no, like these are not the people who are your friends. I'm not suggesting necessarily that there's not like people who hold a lot of controversial views, but there is a big difference between anti-Semitism and like having a political critique of the government of Israel.
Yeah.
And anybody who is trying to elide that distinction, I think, is not an honest actor. Honestly, they are probably have some other political agenda, like say ruining the left.
Totally. And it's kind of spread over into just the broader left globally, where even the Democratic Party was like worried about Jeremy Corbyn possibly winning the British election because of anti-Semitism and its ties to Hamas and Iran, and not wanting to intervene in like Venezuela and like Cuba and stuff. So like not wanting to go to war with them. What a crazy person. But it's like, it's woke smearing, which I blame primarily on the radical liberalism side, which the right's adopted, and it's so easy to twist. Like, you say racism to one person and they're going to stop because they're not going to be able to argue against like a feeling.
Yeah, no, it is a form of blackmail, and it was invented by the left liberals.
Yeah.
And you see it over and over again, right? You would say essentially like the pattern goes concern troll on some identity, and an identity that genuinely has real issues with marginalization, real kinds of historical suffering,
Totally.
Contemporary suffering, whatever it is. And then all you do is just make the innuendo. You just say, well, this doesn't, look at you, you're clearly an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to do. It's like, it turns out the right is way better at this game. Why would you not think this shit would not be turned around and weaponized back on us?
But it was so pathetic because the British people like Owen Jones just bought into it and it like admitted there was a problem. It's like, just say no, there's not a problem. Don't feed into the lie by trying to argue against some conspiracy theory that's spread to like smear your group. Like,
no, it's not. At some point it is, methinks the lady doth protest too much, where he is writing these 4 different articles that are all like, well, Labour does have an anti-Semitism problem, but actually they're dealing with it. It's like, fuck you. Stop it. Absolutely stop it. Like, there are 4 different headlines, under his name with the phrase anti-Semitism and Labour or the left.
Yeah.
Just kind of mashed together there, for all to see. What is anyone to take from this except to say, wow, there's smoke and fire here.
I hate the gays now. At least British gays. Except for all the ones that love us. You're all supporters and I love you.
No, I think it was dear friend of the show, Amy Therese, said yesterday or something, sort of basically said, like, if you hear these smears, particularly against Bernie Sanders, the correct response is to sort of ignore them and move on.
Totally.
Like, you should not give them, just dismiss them. Dismiss them out of hand and say, no. If there is a deep conversation to be had about anti-Semitism on the left, then cool. We'll have it. And let, great. Definitely have it, but like there's a time and a place. And my question is Donald Trump's administration friendlier to the physical safety and the physical interests of Jewish people in the U.S. than
Didn't you
Bernie
just see
Sanders, a Jew?
He just went to like some Israeli group, defense group, and basically pointed out like, oh, you're going to vote for me, of course, because you have lots of money in real estate and money and stuff.
I
so
like some of you. I don't like others of you.
So basically,
it's
this
amazing
idea of like, oh, the Jews want to preserve their money, like, but it's just like very like historical like stereotype that's often.
Would you say he's using anti-Semitic tropes?
Totally.
Would you say he was saying it was all about the Benjamins?
And I don't think it's like, I think he's just like a fucking moron. That's why he said it. I don't think it's like he has a broad, nuanced like critique like David Duke or anything like that.
No, there's no intellectual side of this. He just like is literally a fart-brained weirdo who just has like some ideas about Jews.
He's
like,
probably just so stupid. He was just like, oh, these are rich people, so I'm going to say what I say to everyone else and not be aware that it might be problematic in the grand scheme of things.
Well, but keep in mind, in the room, he was applauded wildly.
Totally.
Like, it's not like this didn't go down well. So you would be already on sort of thin ice to pretend that there's a sort of monolithic political identity called Jewishness.
Yeah.
There are right-wing Jews. I'm afraid to tell you this.
What?
I know.
Next, you're going to say Israel's not a socialist paradise.
Yeah, I mean, well, to the extent that there is still any credible left wing in Israel, I'm sure they are feeling pretty darned unsafe. and our president, cuddling up to Netanyahu is not going to help.
It's actually not my president.
Oh,
hashtag resist.
Yes, we are the resistance. And so therefore, smearing Bernie Sanders is a really interesting thing. If you think about like what positions has Bernie taken, he's sort of said like, "Hey, I think Palestinians are human."
Yeah,
like I think that's about the level.
Yeah, he doesn't. He still believes in the state of Israel. Like he's not a radical. He rejects BDS, which disagree with him or not, which
sure,
I do. But
I sincerely disagree with him, but not right this second.
But often his accusations are due to his support from people like Rashida Tlaib, or probably what's your last name, Ihan Omar, and also like one of his people is Linda Sarsour.
Yep.
And basically they're just pinning the anti-Semitism on him. But also,
let's assume these people are in fact anti-Semitic.
I don't think they are.
No, I mean there's a conception of racism, right, which is incredibly vulgar, and it actually just means talking about race.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know what? I personally prefer staying away from talking about race as much as possible.
Yes, you're white.
Yeah. Well, that too. Thanks for pointing it out.
Well, actually, you're 10% Middle Eastern.
Yeah, I'll be publishing my 23andMe results. No, to the extent that it is easy to fall into a lot of traps, right, by talking about race too much or in the wrong tone of voice.
Totally.
However, just saying that somebody said something that invoked the concept of race is not racist.
Yeah.
And you are not upholding white supremacy by saying, or rather, here's how this gets weaponized, right? Let's say I want to make a statement and say about like the historical effect of redlining and say, hey, these neighborhoods, which were majority black, have been massively structurally disadvantaged in this ways. Like, you know how this will be used. If you keep buying this idea that, like, to say that these neighborhoods were primarily black is, in fact, a racist statement, then the actually cynical and weaponized elements of the right will turn around and say, well, who's the real racist?
Yeah.
Like, listen to what you're saying. You're saying these are shitty neighborhoods? Why? You're saying that because you're a racist.
I agree.
It's completely silly.
It's like the Democratic strategy.
Wow, you agree they're shitty neighborhoods? Wow, you cancel racist.
I mean, like the Democratic strategy of like, oh, why would this black person vote for Trump? And then conservatives will turn back like, oh, why would you be racist and say they can't be that? But like, if you said working class, nothing can be used against you. Like, there's no slur for being like, oh, this working class person voted against their interest.
Oh,
what are you going to say?
Don't bait the sort of like the centrists into coming up with a slur for
Bring it on, Candace Owens.
for class analysis being well, no, it's definitely happened. Like there are certainly Twitter
Has
weirdos.
it?
There are Twitter weirdos who have said like that to do simple class analysis is in fact racist.
Yeah, well, they're losers.
Of course they are.
They love you all
love
still,
losing
and
elections.
if you listen to the podcast.
Yeah, no, not those people.
No. Only the ones that don't listen.
Those people are not still listening to us.
We're cloud chasers. But kind of going on to the Bernie Sanders thing, I've just noticed more and more of this anti-Semitism trope being spread across to other parts of the left, including like the American left, and with Trump really pushing towards like a Zionist agenda of moving the embassy to Jerusalem, saying the Golan Heights, which is actually Syrian land but controlled by Israeli occupation, as Israeli territory. And now recently he said he would end federal money to any university in the U.S. if they don't deal with anti-Semitism, which is basically the way it's written, includes boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel to Palestinian liberation, because he also changed the position of Jews. He made it basically part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and Judaism will now be reclassified as both a nationality and a race, which is like...
Or and a religion.
Nationality it's already a religion.
Well, sorry, it's a nationality and a religion.
And a race.
So it's covered by the idea of national origin, which is the specific language of the Civil Rights Act. Anti-discrimination protections are
because religion is not covered by the
origin.
civil rights. It's only nationality and race.
And so it's a completely cynical move, and you have to believe. Do you think this person is doing this for reasons that are really to do with the like protection of power, like those Jewish people in the U.S. without particular power?
Yeah,
it's not. It's a complete cynical move.
Totally.
But if you buy into like you end up in a very weird position if you kind of follow this logic, right? You say, cool, yeah, this is great. This is much better than Jeremy Corbyn in the UK or Bernie Sanders, the actually Jewish man, who's like not an anti-Semite. Let's just be clear. I'm gonna buy into the fallacy I just said, which I'm gonna refute the point, and I'm not gonna refute it with any. I'm just gonna say no, you're wrong. It's easy. Bernie Sanders is not an anti-Semite.
Exactly, but I mean, I think a lot of people are taking this recent executive order from Trump as a major loss, but I kind of view it in the other way of a major win, because when we look into the stats of Jewish Americans, especially younger Jewish Americans with an education of like college and high school and stuff, a large percentage no longer have an affinity for a strong connection to Israel just because they're Jewish, and many are actually calling out the Palestinian struggle. And I think the reason we're seeing such a hard clapback of Zionism from both the Democratic Party and the right wing, both right wing, but like the Republican Party, is because they're seeing the major wins. We have 4 congresswomen who actually said they supported the BDS movement, which is like crazy, knowing how strong the ties of Israel and the U.S. are. We see more people being aware of BDS and more left-wing people actually getting credible attention, like Abby Martin and Mike Preissner. It's just like we're seeing more and more of the world call this issue, especially Europe, Norway. I think Oslo just did BDS.
The anti-Semitic parts of Europe.
Yeah. Ireland, Iceland. I think they're just so worried about this idea of questioning the Israeli state that they're just pushing more and more right. And I mean,
it was political suicide for a long time.
Yes.
And I think it's part of the change has been that there are perhaps more and more politicians who their entire way of getting elected, to the extent that you believe in electoralism, right, is that they are accountable to their electorate.
Totally.
The sort of Ilhan Omars of the world, right, are in some sense, right, have to be in step with their electorate, because they're not just like astroturfed candidates who take giant amounts of corporate money and kind of get elected no matter who, like by a sort of indifferent populace. And so to the extent that, there was once upon a time, right, where to within that frame of like I engaged in the democratic machine, you just cannot say this shit. You cannot say it out loud.
I mean, for Bernie, even if he does believe in like BDS, I think still right now it is a contentious topic because he is under so much pressure. But also the fact he's kind of seemed to legally move closer to that position throughout the last couple years, just shows how strong the political tide has kind of moved in that direction.
Yeah, I guess the thing for me is it's an incredibly lazy and incredibly marginal group of people who believe that. Let's say that the most hysterical presumptions about Trump's actions, right? Because there were a lot of people whose reaction to Trump's redefinition of Judaism as a a national or nationality and race and things was actually like the first sign of a new Holocaust starting, which yes, I think is rather silly. But let's say this were true, then who would you want on your side? Would it be the kind of the Trump administration and the people who think this shit's awesome? Or would it be the people who have devoted their life to an incredibly unpopular struggle for Palestinian liberation? Like, who are the people who are actually going to be on your side and lay their lives down for your safety and protection? It's definitely not the Trump administration. So, like, why would you be suspicious of these people whose primary concern is not anti-Jewishness?
Yeah,
it's literally like, hey, dignity for humans and their safety and being guaranteed. And
it's even more hilarious because this group that pushes like this kind of pro-Israel, like pro-Christian narrative of like the right-wing establishment doesn't actually, like, there's no consistency in all of this. It just recently in Israel prevented Christian Palestinians from going to the holy sites in the city of Jerusalem. Like, it's not even like, it's not a religious thing. It's like a hyper-nationalist, ethno-nationalist project. And it's often for selfish Christian fundamentalist purposes.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's also an easy attack because woke people are the ones that are actually going to care about this accusation. Like, the right wing doesn't give a fuck. Like, they just want to win, and the left wing, the liberal left wing, would rather care about purism versus actually winning anything.
Yeah, and so that's why the accusation of anti-Semitism is worth a response.
Yeah.
And you must give it full credence such that you can sort of refute it using debate nerd tactics. And those are, turns out, ineffective against a disingenuous accusation. They don't actually mean it.
Like, if anyone says that, just be like, no, it's not, and it's end the conversation there. It'll irritate them probably more than it irritates you, and it'd be kind of actually fucking hilarious.
Yeah, just if you hear a claim of X left-wing figure is an anti-Semite, you just go, no, they're not.
Yeah,
and that's it.
It'll irritate them.
Yeah, say no, they're not, and they go, yeah, they are. You go,
no, you're wrong.
No. And then don't fuck them. just a reminder.
Unless they have a really giant dick. I'm just kidding. But also the anti-Semitism thing is no longer even in the West anymore. I just saw with Bolivia, which we've talked about quite a bit on the show, American Jewish groups, like primarily like Israeli Jewish groups, have been writing articles about how Bolivia's government is suddenly pro-Jew again.
Yay!
Because Morales was anti-Jewish because he cut ties with Israel because he believed in equal rights for Palestinians, which is great. But it's kind of like showing that this whole struggle of like anti-Semitism is being completely co-opted by a group that's so often doesn't give a shit about it and often won't actually address the groups who promote anti-Semitism.
They absolutely do not care.
They don't care.
They're like, this is completely cynical. It's just, they have literally just learned a lesson from liberals, which is you can make these kinds of smears.
Yeah.
And it comes with no personal cost to make it if it's false. And it's very hard to get the stain off. So the thing is, like so many of these things, right? The right has learned the tactic and employed it better.
It really just shows overall why identity politics as a focus of political discussion really is going to hurt the left wing in the long run, because it's just so easily co-opted by the right, and it often has such high contradictions within our capitalist system that it really doesn't make sense eventually, where like women in power and stuff can still institute forces, and we're going to be totally okay with it. And
Yeah,
that's a problem.
I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but I always like to remind people the phrase, yelling fire in a crowded theater is from the Supreme Court decision about free speech, right? And this like it is held up by elements of the kind of liberal left to say, well, there's limits to free speech. And like that ruling came literally from a ruling against anti-war Jewish socialists who were handing out pamphlets protesting World War I. That's literally the ruling was saying that was equivalent to yelling fire in a crowded theater. Now, without any guile or fucking sense of irony, there are people who claim to be leftists or socialists kind of using the same argument to say, well, you just can't say these things.
There's limits on free speech, like all things, but it's like
fuck you.
The limits are always on us. They're always used to like
they will only be weaponized
you.
against us. Like we are not like we will never structurally we do not hold this power, and therefore we will not be able to wield this power. If we can, it's only brief and temporary, but in general, the more you give you give power to the tools that will only be weaponized against the left, most effectively by the right. And therefore you're a sucker playing a sucker's game.
We literally deported Jews to Russia because they had left-wing views.
Yeah.
So we don't give a fuck. Or America does not care if you're Jewish or Christian. They just care if you have the right politics, which is the capitalist right-wing order. And sadly, the state of Israel holds a very right-wing platform, and often it's used as like mercenary state to institute projects against countries like Syria and Iran. So
so speaking of the left wing,
yes,
in America, there's been a lot of how would you describe them?
There's a socialist
meme candidates,
and I mean socialists in like quotations. There's a lot of people claiming to be socialist.
TikTok candidates. Yeah. This is folks like Joshua for Congress
from Washington.
He's Washington State. Who's the other guy? I can't remember.
His name is
Justin.
He's from
Congress.
Texas. He got in recent trouble, so I think I sent it to you.
Yeah.
He basically wished cancer upon Obama, and one of his things was like, he bought an $11 million home and he's privileged. And I'm like, okay, but there's no class analysis in that critique. And also, a lot of Americans probably still have very fond memories of Obama, so that's a very stupid thing to send. I mean, this person's like,
you can attack Obama, but like the thing is, do it like
in ways that matter.
And there's still an aesthetics argument to say, which is if you are seeking elected political office under a socialist banner, and you're sort of using that as your personal brand, then maybe like don't do this.
I mean, he's gonna lose. He has like 1,000 followers on Twitter.
Yeah, well, so Joshua for Congress is
much more.
Has a lot of followers on Twitter. He tweets a lot.
He has TikToks,
and I believe he's running unopposed now, effectively.
Yeah,
so he may win, and like, good on him. I'm
worried.
I'm skeptical, and I'm skeptical largely because I genuinely think there are some, like, it's kind of a I don't know how to phrase this. It's the DSAification of like socialist identity, which is to say that you can comfortably exist within a left liberal frame and call yourself a socialist. And honestly, I don't know. He may well be.
I don't think he is.
Well, yeah. I mean, to put it this way, it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because the packaging of this is not about winning political power per se. It's memes. It's memes which are all like, CEOs work harder than, fry cooks work harder than CEOs, and just saying like
sex workers now work harder than CEOs. That was one of his recent tweets.
Oh, fuck off. Yeah, a lot of clap back tweets and stuff, and like this is fine, but you're not really winning any contest for ideas, and going on TikTok for like, God, I hate it.
But also, I
hate it
just
so
saw
much.
recent tweet. You mentioned Greta Thunberg and how her like being so prolific has like kind of, he believes, changed the viewpoint of people with autism, and he came out of autism. But I think like that's cool. Like I don't really care. I care about your platform, but I think it's so fetishized in identity politics. And when you look into its platform, so much of it is such deconstructed into identity versus a class analysis. I think we're just building a bigger grave for the small left that's left in like the US. And these people are kind of fucking us over more because they're growing and growing and branding socialism as basically as like a social democracy of like hyper identity politics for class.
Maximal liberalism, I think is the phrase.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe there was a tweet the other day which was to his 50 or 60,000 Twitter followers during from a campaign account saying non-binary people are valid, non-binary people are valid, non-binary people are valid, which is like, yes, true, absolutely, and we love our non-binary listeners. However, is this is a person running for local office effectively? What? Who is this for?
It's for the clapbacks.
Well, it's a kind of maximal liberalism, only to say that like this is how you persuade people in your electorate that you have the right politics is by giving the right signifiers on important, but actually kind of like important issues. But it's very different when you're in a campaign.
But it's weird because when you look at his platform, like there's tons of things both me and Gian agree on, like Medicare for all and like Green New Deal and all that great shit.
Sure.
But there's things that are really fucking weird to focus on, like abolishing private golf courses. Like, why is that part of your platform? Like, that sounds crazy to a regular person.
How many private golf courses do you think there are in his electorate?
0.
Right, yeah, but like was 0 or 1 or something. But the point being, right, if the premise behind like building worker power, right, is more workers than there are bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And so to focus in on the an issue like, say, non-binary people, like how many people of his electorate are animated by this particular issue? I'm going to assume a small number are in fact non-binary, and another small number are animated by this issue and will only vote for a candidate who thinks this way. What, like, to whose class interest is he speaking? If he's speaking as a socialist, then you tell me, like, are like, if let's say if you have a non-binary person who is a billionaire, are we just validating that person's identity? We're like, yeah, that's chill. This person is good with me. Like, it's completely incoherent. To kind of fetishize the margins. And once you like, to the extent that it's just we're talking about small numbers of people.
Yeah.
And so if you're building your campaign around the most marginalized and the most disadvantaged structurally, that's cool and all, but like, how do you build a base of power?
Yeah. And I see more and more people just like them, like going into office. I think for a lot, for like the Justice Democrats or like the new Congress initiative. And they just post things where I'm like, yes, I agree, but it's just the priority right now. Like, people like, legalize magic mushrooms today. And it's like, is that the issue we're going to prioritize right now? Like, people are dying from insulin and like lack of housing. Like you could say end a drug war, and that's actually a much broader program that probably
affects a lot of people.
Affects a lot of people. Like, this is where like people who do magic mushrooms or like PMC, like people are like hippies or like people like us. No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? Like, they're not people who are like suffering from this system at the root core.
Yeah, it is like,
it's a virtue signal.
Right. You're to fetishize the margins, right, and to pick essentially like signaling issues that signal your inclusion in a certain social milieu, right? Is not doing a socialism.
They're doing the same thing that Elizabeth Warren said for her whole campaign,
right.
Is extreme fetishism of extreme minorities to seem woke and for some reason they compare that to Bernie Sanders, who instead is offering universal programs to everyone and not really fetishizing like extreme minorities, but instead saying we're going to include everyone just because it's universal. It's why she's so popular, and these people are legitimizing a system that's going to basically end the run of like future Bernie Sanders and like people.
So like the Joshua for Congress specifically had a abolish the CIA as a plank of his platform.
Good luck.
Which to be clear,
we support.
Yeah, that's great. The problem is like, is this really is this what you're talking about?
There's no legitimate movement to do that right now. Like, where's the backing? Bernie Sanders is doing so well because he has a legitimate grassroots working class backing.
Right. Meet people where they are. Talk to them about their issues and start where the people are. Mm-hmm. And maybe you can bring them along on some of these journeys. But this, like, abolish the fucking CIA is just like crazy. You're only talking to the most extremely online, like,
Antifa.
ultra leftist liberals. Yeah. Because this is a fucking liberal position. Because, like, honestly, the idea of abolishing the CIA terrifies me.
Yes.
And it terrifies me not because I think it's a bad outcome, but it's because I believe that, like, you need some theory of change and a theory of power. And it turns out if you attempt to do that, you will be dead. We will all be dead. Like this is not just paranoia. I'm just simply saying, like, if this is an instrument that has actual consequence, like an instrument of state that has consequence, then an attempt to abolish it will result in the deaths of many people.
What do you mean? The CIA has never tried to persecute left-wingers.
Oh. This has a similar political substance to, like, Storm Area 51.
Yeah.
Like, it is literally just the same message.
Well, so it's crazy. Like, I talk to my family a lot, and they're not hyper-political people, and they're very, like, working-class people from the Midwest. I mentioned Bernie's campaign, and, like, even the things he's saying, they're very skeptical, because for so long, both parties just don't give him anything. And they're like, I like those ideas, but I'm very skeptical if he's actually going to done. And, like, why would you go more extreme when, like, a lot of middle Americans are so disheartened, they don't actually feel like the system's going to actually get the things that are the basics, like universal health care, housing, like education.
You say it precisely because to be maximally liberal is to be, quote unquote, more left.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm the most left-wing candidate. People are like, I'm to the left of Bernie, right? Are the people who are literally just like, I have embraced some more liberal ideas that are a little more extreme.
Yeah.
And extreme not in any political dimension, just extreme because they're just out of step. This is not an argument for incrementalism. It's just an argument for actually, like, having some fucking theory of change. Like, how do political ideas, come about? How do they become popular? And how do they get enacted? Mm-hmm. And just literally tweeting shit and saying, I'm the most left-wing candidate that's ever run for office, and he literally fucking said, it's like, no, fuck off.
Also, as TikToks
You've done
cringe.
Nothing. Yeah, and stop posting cringe on Maine.
Yeah, stop being on TikTok. You're not a 12-year-old boy showing off his abs.
Julian Castro. You don't have to post cringe.
I think when we look at the kind of hyper-focus on identity, we can kind of go back to our favorite kind of things, which is gay news, as twink and post-twink. Now there's this whole idea of, like, oh, do you benefit from straight passing privilege within the gay community? And it was kind of inspired by this YouTuber. I think his name was, let me just quickly check. I think it's Michael Henry. I've seen his videos before. They're extremely lib, normie shit, and they're based in, like, LA, which is, like, if you're WeHo gay, you're probably, like, normie as shit, unless you're not.
Shout out to our Marxist WeHo gays.
Yeah, solidarity, comrades. And it's kind of, it's just the Libby-ish bullshit, because it basically just ends of, like, no matter what you present yourself as, there's benefits and consequences to both. And it's like, well, then it means nothing to us. Like, it's just kind of like an extreme fetishism of, like, what it means to be a straight acting gay. Like, if you're gay, you're gay.
Well, so it's buying into a certain kind of privileged discourse.
Yeah.
And I would, yet again, like, I genuinely think our political discourse would be massively improved if every time somebody was about to say privilege,
We shoot
they
them?
just... Well,
I'm just kidding.
yeah, we gulag them.
Yeah.
No, if you just made the mental substitution, and preferably the verbal substitution for just saying like class,
Yeah.
like, or like, because it turns out what they're like. Put it this way: if you are a rich, effeminate gay,
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you're going to have a better time than a quote unquote straight acting poor gay.
It's like Peter Thiel. Like, he is so wealthy. He's beyond the limits of what the governmental system can imply on him as a gay man. That'll just full on support like extreme right wing groups. Like, he was a Trump backer. Like, I don't think Trump's like super far right. I think he's just like a right nationalist. But it's like they don't care because they're so rich beyond the limits that it doesn't really matter. It's like people in like the Gulf states.
Yeah.
Their children are like on bikinis on like yachts. And it's like if you were back home in a bikini, you'd be like sentenced to jail. So it's like
Sure, if you're of the wrong class, and so you think about historically, right? In times of extreme social prohibition and disapproval for homosexuality,
mm-hmm.
you have somebody like Noel Coward, who managed to sort of swan around in the upper echelons of society, incredibly flaming homo, but it was never mentioned.
Yeah.
You know why it was never mentioned? Because he was fucking rich and of that upper crust. This is much more significant to your life.
Totally.
I guarantee you, what I would like for everyone in a beautiful classless society is, of course, a kind of liberation from the strictures of performing gender and orientation according to other people's rules. But it turns out that the enforcement of those rules is incredibly contingent on your structural power.
Yeah.
And so, yes, the libbiest fucking take is saying, well, you other person who, is dying of fentanyl overdoses and lives in a car after working 3 jobs, you have it so much easier than me because, you don't flap your wrists around or whatever. Like, no, absolutely not. This is like, or rather, you're playing a game with no stakes whatsoever.
Yeah.
To compare your quote unquote privilege with this person. I guarantee it's only a set of rules that people are policing amongst themselves.
I mean, these people who made the video are professional YouTubers, which shows like
The most oppressed.
how detached they are from like any reality. But I mean, the fact you have this connotation of what it means to be a straight acting gay kind of feeds into this idea of like what's the proper way to act gay and what isn't. Like there was a Pink News video recently of like British people's most gay moments, and it was like, oh, I wear makeup, or like I got a pickup truck with my lesbian girlfriends. Like, why are we feeding into the stereotypes that we seem to really hate, but then also really legitimize? It's just kind of like,
well, we like to fetishize once again the margins.
But also,
To be marginalized is to be virtuous. I mean, the sexual politics of being feminine, say, in the gay world are, they're real.
yeah.
But that said, like,
But the same applies to like masculine gays, where so
Exactly.
many would be like, oh, you're just repressed, or you're self-hating of your feminine side, and that's why you act like a gym bro bunny. It's like,
yeah, like Pete Buttigieg.
like gay men like to look good and are very like visually pleased.
Well, men are visually stimulated.
Men in general
yeah.
are very visually stimulated. So of course, men are gonna put a large gay men are gonna put a large percentage of efforts into their appearance.
Well, yeah, it is pretty silly to start saying like to be quote unquote straight passing or straight acting is to be performing your presumably sincerely held sexual orientation incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like you're just policing shit at that point. Stop it.
What's the
Don't
same
do
if
that?
It's the same with like people who are like, oh, I prefer a man who's like more muscly, and it's like, oh, you're anti-femme, and it's like you can have preferences. Like
I like femme guys.
yeah,
I
like some muscly men. I like all kinds of men.
Gross. Well, you're wrong. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we solved that issue.
I want someone to carry me around.
Yes, that's
Walking's hard.
Sam's sexual orientation is sedan share carrier.
Yeah. I wish.
Yeah, just be recumbent.
That's my whole point of the podcast, is to get enough money where I can just never walk again. Support me on Patreon.
Wait, why won't you be able to walk?
Because they're
The muscular man.
They're gonna carry me all around.
Oh, okay.
After the rough pounding.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure where you were going with that.
But no, it's stupid. It's like complete like liberal bullshit.
Well, with that, I think we should go get on a plane to New Zealand.
Yes. We will see you all in the new year. Enjoy your episodes while we're gone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and have a happy new year.
Bye.
Bye.